So please, Blaze, let me fly as your wingman just a little while longer.
You want to know my story? Sure, why not? You know, you remind me a lot of myself when I was your age. Just another nugget from Sand Island. Well, if I were to start off, I guess there's no other way. 15 years ago, there was a war. That's right. Between two of the biggest countries, Osea and Yuktobania. Despite the ceasefire, something caused Yuktobania to formally declare war. Next thing you know, Osea and Yuktobania are at each other's throats. Hatred bred more hatred. From that conflict, a group of pilots had emerged to become a pillar of morale for the entire Osean military. Dubbed the Rosgrees, they, set out to end the war and restore peace between the two nations. Unfortunately, unseen forces weren't looking to end it. Survivors of the previous war, those who still held hatred in their hearts, were looking to cause as much damage to both sides, kidnapping both political leaders and pulling strings behind the scenes in the hopes they can get revenge. They even attempted to end the Rosgrees by making the Osean military believe they were traitors. Luckily, the Rosgrees managed to escape and go rogue, discovering the conspiracy, stopping the war, and also preventing a terrorist attack that would have resulted in the deaths of millions. We had hoped that through our actions we could have created an everlasting peace, a clear blue sky no longer in need of heroes. But I guess things don't always go according to plan in this strange real world. I heard earlier this year another Osean conflict was on the horizon. Maybe the world still needs me. Maybe I'm not done. Okay, I've decided. It's time to come out of retirement and I'm taking you with me for the ride. Strap in as we once again take off into the wild blue in this review of Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown.
Hey, for this review, I'm gonna call you Kid. Got it? Good.
Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown is the 16th game in the Ace Combat franchise. Yeah, you heard that right. Originally published by Namco until eventually merging with Bandai, Ace Combat 7 released a full 15 years after the release of Ace Combat 5: The Unsung War, which just so happens to be my favorite video game. So, you know, no pressure. Taking place a full 9 years after the events of Ace Combat 5, Ace Combat 7 is set in a fictional universe known as Strange Real. It's similar to the world we live in, but not too much to the point where war is constantly erupting. Ace Combat 7 is developed by Project Aces, who are an internal development team responsible for the Ace Combat franchise since 2001. The Ace Combat franchise was originally published by Namco, but then they merged with Bandai and now fly under a unified banner. The Ace Combat franchise is currently being directed by Kazutoki Kono, who made his directorial debut in Ace Combat 5. Now he runs the show. Not too shabby. More on this later, but first, Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown begins in the continent of Eosia, where the Kingdom of Eosia decides to go to war against Osea. Why? Because Osea created a space elevator nearby and it caused pressure on the economy. So let me get this straight. In order to deal with Osea building a space elevator near their country, so not even in it, also with Osea themselves footing the bill, meaning Eosia doesn't pay a cent, Eosia decides to go with a cheap economic plan of going to war against one of the strongest nations in the world. Congratulations, you just played yourself. All because your neighbors decided to open up an amusement park next door and now they don't hang out as much as they used to. You know what? It's too early to get into this. Main characters, let's go. In Ace Combat 7, you play as Trigger, a silent Osean pilot with absolutely no personality or characteristics other than the fact that you're a good pilot. That's it. Even hentai protagonists are more fleshed out, and half of them, you can't even see their eyes through that stupid haircut. An easy way of fleshing out the blank slate is by allowing the player's actions to help them shape the scene. Ace Combat 5 and 0 both do this in different ways. In Ace Combat 7, you're on rails, which is a shame because I couldn't immerse myself in it at all. There are characters in the plot, but for the life of me, they aren't properly utilized. For example, you have Avril Mead, aka Scrap Queen, who by all accounts starts off the game, and thus should be treated as the narrator to our story. She's a mechanic who lost her father in what I assume was the Circum-Pacific War, and decided to build a plane out of spare parts in a scrapyard. She makes a working plane out of junk, and after surviving getting shot out of the sky, becomes imprisoned for breaking wartime aviation laws, despite the fact that war has just officially started at that point. Ace Combat 7 begins then bungling its narrative from this moment onwards. Throughout the game, there's this hot and cold approach to storytelling where Osea are muddled in their portrayal. You're fighting on their side, and there are corrupt military officials, mismanagement, and just general confusion in regards to what the flying f*** is going on from a narrative perspective. During my entire playthrough, I had absolutely no idea who are my wingmen, nor did I really seem to care. As far as I'm concerned, there's no one in the cast who I grew attached to, and just when it looks like there would be, they are promptly transferred from being a pilot, which then leads to them being unceremoniously killed off screen. There's so many side characters that are killed off screen in this storyline that I just couldn't get attached. It's just like, here's a new character and, oh look, brownies are done. Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown storyline stripped away the joy of flight I got from the Unsung War, to the point I felt frustrated, numb, and incredibly lonely during it. Which is something you never want from a story. I had no allies, no sense of someone having my back. I was hollow. I was just a pilot named Trigger, which is weird because you eventually are given your own squadron. Let's talk about the pseudo-villains of Ace Combat 7, the Kingdom of Erusia. The game is portraying Erusian Princess Cosette as some kind of naive but well-intentioned world leader. You can't play that card when you decide to go to war. She selfishly attacks Osea, which results in the deaths of countless people and even allegedly results in the assassination of a beloved Osean political figure. There are serious ramifications as a result of her actions. At the very least, I see her as an idiot who needs to be put on trial for breaking a peace treaty. Speaking of the Osean military mismanaging things, we need to talk about former President Harling. Now, my goal is to make these videos spoiler-free, so I am not going to reveal his storyline. But what I will say is when a massive world-changing plot point happens involving him, I didn't believe it. Why? Because the man doesn't really enter the scene. No speaking roles, no cutscene, just nothing. One of the things that happens in the midst of transition from Ace Combat 5 to 7 is the creation of 2 arsenal birds that are made to provide security for the newly designed space elevator. This is mind-bogglingly out of character for Harling, who by all accounts was an anti-war, pro-globalization politician. The Arkbird was originally a maneuverable orbiting spacecraft used in a collaborative effort between Osea and Yuktobania. Basically, the Arkbird is a figurehead to create a bridge of peace that would span into outer space. Throughout Ace Combat 5, your wingman, Kei Nagase, aka Edge, told you about the personal significance it had on her, as well as what it was supposed to represent, which is made all the more heartbreaking when your squadron are tasked with shooting it down after the Arkbird gets hijacked by Balkan terrorists. The obvious choice for the Osean military is to rebuild the Arkbird, except building another one and then loading them with even more powerful weaponry. Oh, and using it as a show of militaristic force instead of peace. Yep, I don't see how this will go horribly wrong, and Erusia just hijacked both of them. Why was Harling content with this? He originally drained money from the Osean defense budget to fund the space program, and now he's like, yeah, I'm okay with weaponizing something that was a symbol of peace to which he agreed to Nagase that he didn't like. This is not the President Harling I knew from Ace Combat 5. At this point, he's just a stand-in reference character, a tick in the box for references to Ace Combat 5 to which there are a complete abundance of. Also, what's the deal with the space elevators? Are they good? Are they bad? Scrap Queen basically believes they should be destroyed, but then nothing is done about it. It's just left there with no real follow-through. Same goes with that Balkan scientist. Seriously, who did they ask to write this poorly thought-out disaster of a plot? Huh. Why does that name sound familiar? Let's see what he's done. Oh. Oh no. Oh dear Rosgrees, what have I done? I'm going to save the rest of my negative critiques for later on in the script. In the meantime, let's focus on something Ace Combat 7 does right: the gameplay. Ace Combat 7, from a gameplay perspective, has significantly upped the ante from the PS2 era games that I grew up with. It's fast, it's frenzied, and it's unapologetic to those who step into it expecting a laid-back ride. To some degree, that is a significant problem to those who are stepping in for the first time. In Ace Combat 5, you could go through a minor training course before you get around to tackling the campaign. In Ace Combat 7, you're just thrown to the wolves. There are minor messages telling you how to control the plane, but it's primarily leaving you to figure it out, which is a shame because there's a lot to learn this time around, such as new additions to the game including the use of high G turns and flares. High G turns are when you hit the accelerator and brake at the same time, essentially creating an aerial handbrake of sorts. You can make really sharp turns at the significant cost of speed, which could result in stalling your craft. Flares are an incredibly welcome addition to Ace Combat. When it gets to a point when you cannot evade a missile that's locked onto you, you may deploy an emergency flare to get that missile off your tail. It's a saving grace that really adds an entirely new style of playing, which definitely shakes things up, especially in the respective multiplayer mode. Keep in mind that those additions aren't the only thing that changes Ace Combat's formula. Originally utilized in Ace Combat Infinity is the system of aircraft tuning. Throughout your adventures in the azure skies, you will amass funds that can be used to acquire aircraft parts. These parts can be used to tune the performance of your planes to fit your playstyle. Want your missiles to fly farther, hit harder, and travel faster? How about improving the performance of your plane? Maybe you're going on a machine gun run and need something to increase the chances of filling everything full of holes. After purchasing them in the shop, you can equip upgrades to your plane in the slots provided. Be careful though, as you're only given a few slots, thereby making sure that the player has to carefully evaluate their loadout for the next sortie. I genuinely thought this was a great idea, as it allows players to completely switch up their experience, making it so that they might want to boost their planes just so that they can see how their experience changes. Even if you're not into tuning your planes with parts, each plane in Ace Combat 7's roster gives you a varied experience. How planes handle, their top speed, what weapons they have at their disposal, and how much of these weapons are equipped are all significantly different with each plane. Unfortunately, the chances of me doing a full F-14 run is most likely slim to nil. Despite the fact the story of Ace Combat 7 is barely coherent, the mission structure in the campaign is well put together. I was actually genuinely amazed at how much variety was put into the level design, from standard aerial dogfights, bombing runs, and specialty missions which can alter the gameplay, from losing your IFF, fighting amongst turbulence in a thunderstorm, etc, etc, etc. Multiplayer mode is a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I absolutely love the ability to go head-to-head against other players, as well as the various different maps and throwback music to previous games. It's just a shame that it's severely lacking anything to really build a community around it. You have two choices in terms of modes, Team Deathmatch and Battle Royale, to which I'm just going to call out bullshit. Battle Royale is when players eliminate each other until there is only one left standing. Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown is just giving us deathmatch and outright lying because Battle Royale is a really popular buzzword. I mean, you honestly cannot expect me to let that slide. Another problem that leaves Ace Combat's multiplayer in a spot of bother is tied to rampant monetization. Now, I will get more in depth in this during the wrap-up, but for this particular part, we're focusing on multiplayer. The Ace Combat franchise has a wide variety of planes, both real and fictitious in nature. Some of the more fictitious planes, such as the ADF-11F Raven, the ADF-01 Falcon, and the ADFX-01 Morgan, are locked as DLC. If you're trying to make a competitive multiplayer experience, locking options behind paywalls is kind of a sleazy move. And look, I understand the arguments behind this. They aren't really major game-breaking planes, so it's not an issue. Hi. Considering each plane's stats and tuning setups can drastically alter your playstyle, that argument is about as valid as bringing guns to a martial arts tournament. But Sonic, games cost too much to make. Just let them have this. If games cost too much to make, maybe you're in the wrong industry and should stop. Because the indie circuit doesn't really make this argument. Listen up. I've had to bury Konami, Electronic Arts, and Ubisoft. Why not add one of my favorite non-Sega video game publishers onto that list? So yeah, multiplayer is enjoyable, but there isn't any variation, and the paywalling preventing a full roster hurts it from being more than just a way to earn credits and nothing else. Granted, even without those DLC planes, the multiplayer is somewhat unbalanced since the meta is essentially spamming F-22's QAAMs until everyone on the server wants to come to your house and murder you. Adding to the list of features in Ace Combat 7 is virtual reality missions, which are exclusive to PlayStation. Oh my Rosgrees, it's fantastic to be able to take to the skies and actually look inside the cockpit as you partake in various missions. Now, you don't get a lot of VR missions. There are only 3, but of those 3 missions, it got progressively more difficult to complete. When you've completed the VR missions, you unlock the ability to view an air show from an aircraft carrier, which is a nice palate cleanser from the intense dogfighting. You also gain the ability to replay those VR missions with new unlocked aircraft, essentially changing up the experience. One thing that I will take note in this video is that I got really motion sick when playing these missions. I couldn't take more than 2 back-to-back missions before I started sweating profusely, had shortness of breath, dizziness, and a temporary loss of equilibrium as a result of my experience. I did eventually gain stronger tolerance to those feelings through repeated playthroughs. Since I forgot to properly capture game footage outside of my reactions of getting violently ill, way to go me. One final cliff note before I continue, I decided to go out and buy a flight stick from Thrustmaster, a company which would be making a killing in the porn industry. I found it to be a nice little distraction. At first, playing with the official flight stick took some getting used to since I kept accidentally deploying flares instead of changing the camera. Sometimes when you panic, you might press the wrong button. It also isn't the greatest in terms of changing up the sensitivity. My executive producer, Scott, wasn't a fan of having a lack of resistance even when trying to toggle it, whereas I was more adaptable. That being said, I occasionally forgot to toggle speed compared to the DualShock controllers. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no other way to say it. Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown is beautiful. The graphic fidelity is impressive, and I never noticed a dip in terms of frames per second, detail, or resolution. Each cockpit looks diverse, and the lighting and shadow effects are what makes this game truly breathtaking.
You're breathtaking!
The first time I managed to soar through the clouds and see the rain splash against my plane's canopy, I had the biggest grin. When a game hits those marks, you know you've done something special. So it comes as an unfortunate part in this video where I gotta talk about how Namco Bandai dropped the ball. That's right, Ace Combat Redditors, it's time to talk about that f***ing dog! During one of the cutscenes in Ace Combat 7, we're greeted by Princess Cosette stepping off a plane and greeting fellow pseudo-villains. They chat, voiceover goes on, yada yada yada. During this entire scene, Cosette and the rest of the characters move around, and her dog just stares blankly into the abyss. Not moving or doing anything, it was so mind-boggling, of course the internet turned it into a meme. And I'd be more forgiving if it wasn't for the fact in Ace Combat 5, Namco decided to animate Kirk, who happened to be Chopper's Black Labrador. It was at this point in Ace Combat 7 where my rose-colored glasses shattered and I was able to properly dissect it, so thank you for that. It's just mind-bogglingly insane, the lack of oversight. This somehow slipped past all the QA testers? Or was this supposed to be something that you were eventually going to fix and just forgot to do so? Either way, it's sloppy. Coming back to the franchise is Keiki Kobayashi, who has been the primary composer for a lot of music used in Bandai Namco titles. He recently went freelance, but it's good to have him back on board. That being said, not every song he made completely captivated me, but when he does hit the mark, you better believe it's memorable. It's just a shame that the base game didn't get a music player because some of the more subtle music gets completely lost amongst the monotonous story and white-knuckled gameplay action. The previous games allowed me to just listen to the music, and it helped grow an appreciation, whereas with Ace Combat 7, unless you pre-ordered it, your best bet are YouTube playlists. All things considered, less accessibility equals less enjoyment. Let's move on. When you've beaten Ace Combat 7's campaign, not much else opens up in terms of additional options. Newer difficulties, a new plane, and the ability to use different skins that you might have picked up through gameplay, but nothing else. If the story was compelling, I would have been a little more lenient, but really, Ace Combat 7 became a game where I would just shut my mind off and just not focus on anything besides the gameplay. It's a shame because everyone who worked on it is highly competent, and yet it feels hollow. I played through the campaign on hard, unlocking Ace difficulty and trying to get S rank on every mission, but I have no drive to do it again. You can go back and attempt to unlock named aircraft through hidden challenges, but once again, the campaign feels empty. This feeling of emptiness that is further exacerbated by the final foes, who happen to be unmanned combat drones. Yep, the emotional payoff, folks. Nothing like going against unmanned drones with no real sense of menace. Engage the player, damn it! Earlier in the review, I had mentioned the game has a DLC issue involving locking planes behind paywalls. That's the more egregious example, but another thing that happens is that the other monetizations don't make logical sense to me. Here's an example. If you want to buy the Rosgrees skin, which is only available for the F-14 Super Tomcat, then you have to put down roughly $5 Canadian after taxes towards the F-4E Phantom 2 DLC. If I wanted to grab the Rosgrees emblem, which is only important in the multiplayer matches, I would have to fork over an additional $7 plus tax to get the ADF-01 Falcon Set DLC. I unfortunately acted like a minnow and bought the F-14 skin, and the fact that I can't even use it in the campaign until I've beaten it is what further sunk this game. Finally, we're going to deal with a subject that I talked about in my season finale. Something that matters a great deal to me, and I'll explain why in the subsequent points. In my review of Ace Combat 5: The Unsung War, I was shocked to discover that the English voice actors were uncredited for the work they put in. Some of the stellar voice cast included Karen Strausman and Jameson K. Price, who were gracious enough to get back in touch with me. They essentially told me that voice actors, and frankly most members associated with a production regardless of medium, are required to sign non-disclosure agreements. These agreements prevent those people from saying anything that might negatively impact the company or production they represent, and could face repercussions should anything go awry. I had reached out to Namco Bandai for further comment, to which I received no response. I then attempted to check out their subreddit and discovered it was a dumpster fire that made 4chan look civil. The trail grew cold and fine. It was for a video game that came out when I was in grade 9, 15 years ago. Surely Bandai Namco have learned their lesson, especially after the whole voice actors strike back in 2016. Guess what? They haven't. That's right. Even in the progressive world of 2019, we're still treating voice actors like they're worthless, expendable cogs in an industrial machine where they should just be happy to be a part of. Many of you might ask, why does this bug me? You see, I've been working in television and film since 2009, being taken advantage of through years of unpaid work. To not be credited is the ultimate insult one on a production crew can receive. If you're not earning money on the production, the lack of credit means you never existed. It's that kind of understanding that led to me jumping into YouTube. Years later, I joined a guild, and now that I'm getting paid for my mercenary work as a secondary job and also pursuing work as an amateur voice actor, I have even less sympathy for those who don't credit their cast and crew. And what makes this even more aggravating is the fact that the rest of the English crew is credited. Yeah, 3 cheers for the executive branch, like former Bandai Namco Entertainment of America CEO Mark Tsuji. I'd cry, but honestly, I have no more tears to shed. It's 2019. Actors, regardless of medium, whether film, television, voiceover, whatever, they deserve to be credited. Get yourself together, you're better than this! Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown is altogether an okay game. The story is a mess, but the gameplay can be quite fun. The graphics are top-notch and the audio is pulse-pounding, but the replayability isn't there. The monetization is moronic and the overall feeling is hollow. The campaign is trying to be a throwback to Ace Combat 5 with references and moments to it without any understanding of what made it all come together. Insert reference to Harlang, Anderson, Sky Eye, fly through a tunnel near the end, and call it a day. You know what this is to me? Imagine you had a kid. One that you did everything you could do to ensure that they had a good life. They grew up hardworking, adorable, and showed a real lust for life that made them stand out above the rest. They end up getting accepted into a fantastic university to pursue something they're passionate about, and a month before graduation, they show up at your door telling you they're dropping out and deciding to move back into your garage with some random friend. A mere shell of their former self with no sense of direction or ambition. That's what Ace Combat 7 is to me. And the only reason why I'm this cruel is because Ace Combat 7 leaves me no choice but to compare it to Ace Combat 5. All 7 had to do, really, was not tie any of it to the Unsung War, including getting rid of the Arsenal Bird stuff. It was okay, maybe for one mission, but did we really have to have that matchup 3 times in a campaign? This is not okay. I'm SonicMTD, and when history witnesses a great change, Rosgrees reveals itself. First, as a demon. As a demon, it uses its power to rain death upon the land, and then it dies. However, after a period of slumber, Rosgrees returns, this time as a great hero. It's time to get back to work. This video was proudly supported by Unsung Heroes of Patreon.
Hey everybody, Matthew Tyler DeLeo, better known as SonicMTD. Thank you so much for catching the season premiere of Always Right Reviews, where I covered Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while. Did you miss me? Please be sure to leave me a comment down below. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video, and also take a look at links on this side of the webpage. Up here is going to be whatever YouTube recommends that you watch, and down here is going to be a playlist of every single episode of Always Right Reviews up until this point. If this is your first video that you have ever seen from me, I strongly recommend that you take a look at the other ones. But either way, I'm not going to take up much more of your time. My name is Matthew Tyler DeLeo, better known as SonicMTD. Arigato gozaimasu, and later days.